Okay, so we are now going to discuss on how are we going to deal with an enemy for our player. Okay, so what we have so far in our previous videos is that the player is going to die only if ever it is going to touch an obstacle. Okay, so in fact we have here our cactus. We have okay, so we have tagged it as an enemy. Okay, enemy or an obstacle. Okay, so once it is going to be touched by our player, then subsequently it is going to die and game over. Okay, so what I'm going to introduce to you now is an enemy that is going to move. It is going to patrol on a certain points. Okay, so first I'm going to have the sprite for the enemy. So we have here the sprites. Okay, so it could be the dragon for, but in my case, I'm just going to use my snail. Okay, so on the sprites, I'm going to have the snail. Okay, and I'm going to rename a snail as my enemy. Okay, then I'm going to bring my enemy into my hierarchy. Okay, so I bring it to the enemy here. Now, what I want is that I'm going to have a two box here, one box and another box here. Wait. So that the enemy is going to patrol from this point up to this point. Uh, Cactus enemy. Okay, I'm going to have a box. Okay, we have this one here. Okay, so I'm going to have my box here. Okay, so I'm going to set first. I'm going to have a collider. Okay, then I'm going to duplicate. Okay, so what I want is that my enemy or the snail is going to move, is going to patrol, move from the center, it is going to move there, and once it is going to reach this first box, it is going to go back to this one here, then vice versa. So it's just going to move from this point up to this point. Okay, so how are we going to make our enemy move? So, but first we're going to have a collider. Okay, and since it is going to move, so we're going to have a rigid body. Okay, a box collider 2D and a rigid body 2D. Okay, so I'm here now our enemy. So once it is going to play, our game is going to play, it is then going to move from here, move to the left, then to the right, and so on. Okay, so we are going to create here a script that is going to control our enemy. Okay, so I'm just going to call it enemy controller. Okay, so double click. So we are going to make our enemy move the way we made our player moves. Okay, so what are those things that we're going to initialize? Is first is we have float, move speed. We're going to have it here 200. Then direction. Since it is facing to the left, so we're just going to have, by default, it's going to face, it is going to move to the left. Okay. Then, of course, we're going to have our rigid body 2D. Okay, we're just going to call it enemy RB or whatever. Okay. So next is we are going to, on the start, okay, if ever we are going to go back to our player, so I am initializing here actually those variables that we have initialized there. We have the direction. Now, for the direction for our player, uh, by default, it is 0. It is because we are going to wait for the user to press either the left or the horizontal, no? Horizontal keys to determine the movement or the direction for the player. But in our case, once it is going to be instantiated into our game world, into our game, okay, so it is going to directly move to the left. Why? It is because we are facing our player or our enemy is facing to the left. Okay, so start, as you can see here in our player, in our start, we have retrieved the rigid body. Okay, so enemy RB is equal to get component, then rigid body 2D. Okay, and then into our update, we are going to have uh, enemy that velocity is equal to, oops, okay. So we are going to change now, it is a vector 2, then we're going to change the x. By the way, this is x and this is our y. No changes on the y, only on our x. Okay, so through this way, it is now going to move. Okay, so let us try play. Oops, wait, enemy. Okay, we have not assigned yet our script. Okay, so click and drag, then run. Okay, so as you can see, our enemy has moved from the center to the left. Okay, but what I want is that if ever our enemy touches or collided with this box or anything actually, then it is going to move then uh, to the other way. Okay, okay. So we're going to have here on collision enter. Okay, on collision enter 2D. Okay, so uh, now if ever it is facing to the left, so therefore it is -1. Okay, so how are we going to make -1 to +1? Because if ever I'm going to say here, once direction is equal to 1, okay, so take note what will happen if ever we are going to have this one here. Okay, run. Okay, so it collided with our box, then it moved to the right. Okay, but once it collided to this box, it stays here. Why? It is because our direction now is always 1. Okay, so what I need to do here is if ever positive, we are going to make it negative. So if ever negative, we're going to make it positive. Okay, so actually that is, we are just going to have a multiplication here. We're going to multiply it with -1. Okay, so save. So if ever positive, multiply it with -1, so it will become negative. So if ever negative, multiply it with -1, okay? So this will become positive. Okay, so let's try. Okay, so as you can see now, as it is going to uh, collide with any of our boxes here, it is going to negate the direction. Okay? But as you can see here also, if ever, okay, as it's going to the left, no problem because the head of the snail is on the left. But what I want is that if ever it is going to move to the right, the head must be on the right. Okay? So just like with our player, we're going to use here the local scale. Okay? So you can see here, where's that? So if direction is equal to 1, then we're going to move it to the right. To the left, then we have -1. Okay? So, okay, so if direction, okay, is equal to 1, then uh, enemy RB that transform that local scale. Okay, so just like here, we're going to use here now. We could actually go with the transform directly, but then you can see it is a vector 3. Okay, one is for the x, y, and z. Okay, uh, we could go directly with because why are why are we using here the transforms with small letter t? It is because this script is connected to or assigned to our enemy. Okay? So else if direction is equal to -1, then it is no positive and negative. Okay? So try. Oh, it's the reverse. Okay? Our enemy is having a moonwalk. Okay? So we're just going to actually, it is because by default it is facing to the left. Okay? So that is why, um, as you could see, by the way, we could change it here. Let us try to change it here. So the x is negative. Okay? So that we are going to be consistent. Okay? So when we are to run, so if you're, oh, wait. Oh, okay. Because by default, again, by default, it is our sprite is it is facing to the left. Okay? So even though we have changed it here on our local scale, okay, but when it is going to change the local scale in our code, it is going to depend on the original orientation of the sprite. Okay, in which the original is that it is facing to the left. Okay, so save. So we're just going to reverse. Okay, so we're going to have the -1 if ever it is going to the right. Okay. Okay, so you could see there now it is now moving to the left and right and also with the orientation of the head. Okay. So next is that what I want is that if ever the player is going to touch the enemy, it should die. Okay. So as you can see here, even though the enemy has touched our player, it also goes back to the left or right. But what I want is that if ever this is going to touch our enemy, it is going to die. Okay. So that is like our enemy, we are going to tag it as an enemy. Okay. So if you don't have the enemy again, so you could add tag, then you could add tag here. Okay. So I'm going to assign enemy or the snail to an enemy. Because if I'm not mistaken, we have our player here on collision, okay, so either obstacle or enemy, it is, oh, as of now, it is just going to play our audio. But what I want is that it is going to, no, 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 scene management, a scene manager that loads scene, then we are going to have the game over scene. Okay, so save. Okay, so we have here now our game over scene when we have, or our player touched our enemy. Okay, so next, for example, I'm going to create more than one enemy. So I'm going to duplicate enemy 2. Okay, okay. So what I want is that this play or this enemy here is going by default, it's going to move to the right, and this one here is going to move to the left. Okay? Or actually, we could now. By the way, have you observed that when, okay, here. Okay, so this one here, uh, there is no movement now. It is uh, because of this. Okay, both of them, the player, no, the enemy too, okay, is moving to the, always moving to the left, and this one here is to the right. So uh, there is no movement that is happening now. So the technique here is actually just to have a little space, I think. Okay. Now, but what I want now is that they are going to meet at the center. Okay, so that is why I want this one to move to the left, and this one is going to move to the right. The reverse, the left and right. Okay, so both of them uses the same controller. Okay, and both of them, by default, they are moving to the left. Okay, so we are going to change the direction. Okay, so enemy 2 is going to move to the right by default, so therefore it should have a positive direction. This one here is negative. So how are we going to change that? Because both of them are connected or using the same script. Okay? So what we're going to do is to serialize this one here. Okay? Serialize field, save. Then for the enemy number 1, okay, wait. Okay, so it should move to the left. Okay? And enemy number 2, it should move to the right. Okay, it is positive. So that when I'm going to run, okay, so they are now meeting at the center of the patrol area. Okay, but then still, okay, we are still going to uh, have the game over if ever it is going to touch our enemy. Okay, so another thing is that how about if ever what I want is that um, it's we are going to make it looks like, okay, that our enemies are going to move up to the end of our platform. And once it's uh, to the left. Okay. So first I'm going to move them to the center. Okay. So what are we going to do here? So that we are going to have, by the way, I'm going to run. Okay, what will happen is that it is going to fall from our platform. Okay. So what I want is that I'm going to create here an object, a game object, wherein they are still going to collide. Okay, so that it's going to trigger then that they are going to move to the left back. So guys, I'm going to create here an empty game object. Okay, create empty. Then I'm going to have the name invisible box. Okay, so where is now my invisible box? Okay, so it is there. So that we could have we are going to assign an icon. So I'm just going to have a blue icon. Okay, so that we could see there an invisible, then visible box. Okay, so I'm going to have it here. Okay, by the way, I'm going to have uh, a box collider. Okay, you have the collider there. Okay, at the end. Okay, so that when it is going to touch, okay, this one here, it is going to go back to the left. Okay, so run. Okay, so it seems like our enemy is afraid of falling off from our platform. Okay, but then what I want you to take note here is that um, let us say, okay, for example, okay, so we have there our invisible box and it has a collider. Okay, so when I run, okay, our player is going to um, it's going to collide, so it could not move farther to the right. Okay, so just in case that our player needs to pass through our invisible box, okay, so we must have to make this as a trigger. Okay, so here we're going to create this it as a trigger, but when we are going to run it again, our enemy now falls. Why? It is because it is now a trigger. Okay, so what are we going to do then? Since we only have here an on collision enter, so we're going to have here also an on collider, no, on trigger, I mean, on trigger enter 2D. Okay, so still we are going to change the direction. Okay, so save. So this one here is for the left box, and here is for our invisible box. Okay, so as you can see, it now goes back to the left. Okay, so actually, um, Snail 1 and Snail 2, these are actually sprites for animation. So therefore, you could also animate your enemies. Okay, so the way we have animated our player is the same way on how are you going to animate our enemies. Okay, so you could look for um, any enemies or any characters for our enemy. It could be a sprite or set or a series of sprites so that we could create animations for our enemy. Okay, so on our next videos, we are going to discuss on how are we going to kill our enemy. Then a little AI for the enemies. Okay, so that's all for today, and I'll see you on the next video.